So, ladies and gents, to our final formal speaker of the day, I know we've got the wonderful Mark to help us with our final panel. But Aimee, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and IRMA. We have been mentioning IRMA throughout this conference. You'll be glad to know. But, ladies and gents, another round of applause for the wonderful Aimee. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Sarah, and thanks for your support, Rose, as well. And Epi, really great to hear your presentation as well. As like taking notes, thinking, wait a second, I got to get my head back in my own presentation here. But I've got 3 questions for you as well from your presentation. But I know it's the end of the day for many of you listening from more European time zones, and so I'm going to jet right in and be real timely with my presentation, and really appreciate the chance to share with you all a bit about the Initiative for Responsible Mining Assurance and the work that we're doing to drive value for greater environmental and social responsibility, and some of the work that Epi has been talking about as well, where industrial scale mining happens. So I want to acknowledge first off that when the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals were being written, and 5 years ago, a report done by the UN and their colleagues, it looked at industrial scale mining and recognized that that large scale mining had the potential to positively contribute to all 17 of the UN SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, but that to date, much of that work had been in direct conflict with many of the UN SDGs, whether that was armed conflict or environmental degradation, displacement of populations, community health issues, or human rights. So the question we've asked is, what can we do to flip that reality on its head and look at ways where mining can better deliver the opportunity and positive potential, and certainly reduce the harm that's been associated with industrial scale mining. So the vision of IRMA is a world where the mining industry respects the human rights and aspirations of mining affected communities, provides safe, healthy, and supportive workplaces, minimizes harm to the environment, and leaves positive legacies. And we try to achieve that mission through a system that has a standard and a trusted way to measure performance against that, creating greater value for environmental and social responsibility. As Epi said, the whole, have you put the money there for copper or gold or otherwise to do the work that needs to be done? I always start my presentations sharing that, voluntary initiatives never replace the role of law and government. Strong laws and oversight and the rules that everyone need to play by are essential. The work that I do, IRMA, any other voluntary initiative, is ideally a lever, a permission slip, a market value that drives permission and support for government to do its job and to create value, not just for the economic side of the opportunity, but the economics of environmental and social responsibility as well. So we're very much that cog there that's meant to complement, provide template to laws and government, and also to the community benefit agreements that are created between mines and their communities. So we have basically a 2-pronged program, both the Standard for Responsible Mining, which is now the globe's most comprehensive and rigorous definition of what is responsible mining. It's comprehensive by the breadth, covering 26 chapters. I'll show them in just a moment, so that we're not trading issues off each other so much. It's not greenhouse gas emissions or Indigenous people's rights. It's not clean water or worker health and safety. Is to bring it under one house. Of course, in any given location, some issues are going to be more important than others, but it's meant to bring them into a place where we can have real transparency on the wide range of what makes a company's practices responsible. And that has been developed over a decade of transparent global multi-stakeholder conversation, debating through these issues and agreeing on a best practice level for that. And then, just as important, a trusted, credible, accountable way to measure performance against that, with audits that directly include workers, community representatives, NGOs in a transparent manner, so you can really get to what is that performance. This is a great part of IRMA's value. It's delivered through its multi-stakeholder leadership and accountability. So this is its board of directors. It's the only mining standard globally which is equitably led by civil society alongside the private sector. So these 5 houses, soon to be a 6th house when the finance sector come, each having equal power. They all have 2 votes. If there are 2 no votes from one house, any house, a decision stops. So you can't leave a house behind. Even 8 out of 10 votes doesn't carry. You really need to work through and create value for all stakeholders and accountability for all stakeholders. There are members in IRMA who fall behind each of these voting seats, but these are the companies and organizations who hold those voting roles in IRMA right now. So they know when they walk in that room that they're going to have to check egos at the door and leave their own public relations at the door. They're going to need to come in and try to create something that can work for all, realizing that how they each define value is different. The IRMA standard for responsibility is on our website. It's free and open access, responsiblemining.net. These 26 chapters spread across social responsibility, environmental responsibility, this whole idea of legacy, whether that's the cleanup and reclamation of sites or indigenous people's rights, et cetera, emergency preparedness and response, and also the business integrity of how mines are run. It applies to all mined materials globally, with assessment at the mine level. This is for industrial scale mines. We work closely with those who are working on artisanal scale, pick and shovel, subsistence-based mining, but this standard is focused at expectations for industrial scale mines. And while I spoke earlier to best practice, and that magic certified word is at that best practice level, it's a quite rigorous level. We're not afraid or shy about talking about rigorous. We want to drive value for best practices. But mines at any level of their performance who may be nowhere near best practice are welcomed to come in, be transparent about their performance right now, and then ladder up over time and show their improvement in that. So there are these levels of 50, 75, 100, so that they can show as they go where they are. And just as important, the standard itself is the trust in how performance is measured, is that the audits, as I mentioned, are publicly announced. They do have a site portion. Their workers, community stakeholders are interviewed separate from the mine as well. And this is so key for those of you who are listening, not from the mining perspective, but as from a responsible sourcing perspective, and who you may not even know who your mines are because you have a complex supply chain and it's multiple levels back. Allowing communities, workers, NGOs to be heard with their concerns at the mine level is absolutely critical. When they don't feel heard there, their campaigns and their concerns for change are translated out to the product level, to end brands and accountability held there, even though those companies don't own or operate mines. It's for these reasons in IRMA's accountability that you see this demand coming from diverse stakeholders to use this tool. You've got groups like the World Bank saying, hey, unlike oil and gas, mining is increasing. There are a lot of materials we're going to need for green energy transition. And in response to that, you've got NGOs en masse saying, look, we support green energy transition. We know it's likely to increase some amount of new mining. However, we want increased recycling. We want better durability. We want to reduce some consumption. We want circular economy. But where we need new mining, it should be following best practices, or we're going to undermine our intentions of good in a green energy transition at the top of the supply chain. So they say use IRMA to drive that. And you see that in the Sierra Club's new mining policy, which said, yes, we're going to have some new mining from our very own ask for green energy, but it should meet high bar standards. And this is reflected in the private sector as well. You've got Mercedes-Benz, Daimler asking for responsible sourcing with best practices in mining. This is an ad from BMW. This is also the IRMA Board of Directors meeting with them to talk about responsible sourcing and what does environmentally and socially responsible mining mean. But again, too, in this picture, you see across stakeholder sectors that accountability. And coming back to that early slide I had of the different gears, you know, you've got different groups now also using the IRMA standards as a template now, because it took more than 10 years to create a definition of what is responsible mining that could be respected across stakeholder sectors. It then becomes a template to also improve laws in government across the world. If you check the website, you can get a sense of what does an audit look like. Both the Carrizal mine in Mexico, which is a lead zinc mixed metal mine, small company, and then also Anglo-American, big company, their Unki Platinum mine in Zimbabwe, the first two mines audited against the IRMA standard. You can look at their reports, get a sense there of what transparency really looks like in this sector. There are 100 pages. You see not only what did they do well on, but you also see the things they couldn't meet, the places they still have to improve. And there are another 40 mines in that pipeline in these kind of, you can see the countries where they're already registered, the types of materials. It's not just the jewelry sector. Per Epi's point on the places that are most valuable, you see a lot of materials associated with the energy transition as well, and quite diverse Asia, Africa, North America, etc. of engagement. So I think, Sarah, why don't I stop there, so that watching the clock here as well, and happy to answer any questions that anybody might have here in the chat also.
That's absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Aimee. So, ladies and gents, put your hands together on the other side of your muted mics for the wonderful Aimee and IRMA as a whole. So with that, Aimee, we've got a number of questions that are coming in at the moment. Obviously, the IRMA, is it a standard? Is it a framework? How do you describe it?
It is a standard, and it is a certification, although usually most certifications are pass-fail. You get certified, you don't. So it is multi-stakeholder global standard that describes best practices in mining, but uses a scoring tool so that you can show continuing improvement. So you would need to be audited. Those audits are done every 3 years. And there's a surveillance audit in the midst of it. So it's not a single snapshot in time. It's meant to be a longer term relationship and demonstration of how a site performs.
Great. And that's something as well where, I mean, how long does it typically take? I know that we're still sort of almost at the beginning of the kind of the IRMA journey, etc. How long does it typically take an operation, say Los Bronces, which I think it was Los Bronces that featured in your slides. Yes, I did used to work for Anglo American, so I've been there.
Okay, yes.
If you were the management team for Los Bronces, how much time would it take you to prepare and go through that IRMA audit and process?
If you wanted to go quick and you said, look, our customers are asking for it. And for example, right now, there are car companies who are saying, we're mapping our supply chains, we're going back up, and we want materials only that come from mines that have been audited against the IRMA standard for these reasons. And if you said, look, I want to be the first nickel mine, I want to get out there with, my copper pronto, you could do the whole process in 3 to 4 months. Many mines are taking longer. They might take a year. There's a whole set of them. For example, ArcelorMittal in Brazil, in Liberia, in Canada, they're auditing against the IRMA standard right now. Excuse me, they're self-assessing against it, and they're looking for the places where they perform poorly. Right? So they're saying, like, we're not going to just get an audit out there. We're going to actually do this as a gap analysis on our own performance and fix some issues before we bring auditors out. So some may take a year to do the work, but they could do it quicker.
Brilliant. So it does actually take quite a considerable amount of time. And I guess that's because you actually want them to be doing something that makes a difference rather than ticking boxes.
That's right. And because there's a lot of documentation to add up, they can use a self-assessment tool. We give them the tool that is basically digitized the entire IRMA standard, and they're going through and auditing themselves. And that's creating for them a score. So it's not just a mystery when the auditors walk out, where are we likely to fall in this? They're scoring themselves by chapter. So they can also say, hey, look, in the greenhouse gas chapter, I'm doing pretty well. I'm 67%. But worker health and safety, whoa, 26%. I'm going to bring a little attention here. And that's what we want them to do, because more important than just scoring is driving them to improve environmental and social performance, right? So that's, but then in terms of actually prepping for the auditors to walk out, they've got to have that documentation all loaded in to that tool. So that's where it's really a chunk of work, because the auditors are going to say, show me.
Yeah. So in a past life, I used to be head of audit for technical and sustainability for Anglo American in Africa. And yes, I certainly know the pressure that you can inadvertently put on operations if you get that wrong, and also ask for a whole load of information that, to be completely frank, isn't needed. But I'm sure that was almost part of the 10-year process with IRMA to make sure that none of that is asked for, so you're not wasting the time of those operations.
There will certainly be some who say we ask for more than is needed. I mean, if the critique of IRMA is usually from the mining sector is that it's very detailed. Some will say it's prescriptive. We say we describe. It's not prescriptive, it's descriptive, because if you just say have a stakeholder engagement plan appropriate to the local context, that leaves a lot of interpretation on what that means, and it tends to have conflicting sense of definition from across stakeholder lines. So we're clear, and we find actually most mining companies appreciate the clarity. They want to know when the auditors come, is this what they're looking for? Are they looking for that? Have I prepped what's being asked for? I can see, Sarah, too, a question that's a very worthy question. How is it financed? Which tells you, like, who are you accountable to? So IRMA is financed through membership. So any of you listening, you're welcome to be members. Mining companies come in as pending members until they begin the work of an independent third-party audit, which we ask them to do within 12 months of their pending membership, so that the title even of member doesn't become a claim on its own before getting to the work, but you get that 12-month period to get started. We don't say that you have to meet a certain performance level we want this to be a table where the conversation about improving practices is hosted. So membership is financing it. Private sector members can make added extra money. So for example, you have some, including car companies, contributing to a new draft standard we'll be releasing in the next few weeks on the smelting and refining level. So we have a standard at the mine level now, new standard coming out for smelting and refining to carry it down through the supply chain. Also one on the other level that's for the exploration and development sector, pre-production of mine materials, that earliest phase where everything from indigenous peoples' prior consents to biological baseline studies and water studies are done, as Epi was talking about. So that money is coming in. Then we have a grant from the Ford Foundation, Patagonia, the clothing company, grant. As well, we have a grant from GIZ, German aid agency, for work in Latin America with NGOs and communities as well there. So that kind of mix of money.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. And thank you for spotting Norm's questions in there in chat. One final question before I go across to Mark and the final panel session. And this comes from an anonymous attendee. So whoever you are out there, thank you very much for this question. And they ask, how does IRMA see the global industry standard on tailings management, moving the bar on tailings, or where did it fall short? Where does IRMA, I guess, interface with the tailings standard and review?
Well, I mean, I say, first of all, I sigh because this could not be a more important question. It's a place where human rights and environmental issues directly overlap. They're not two separate silos in this space. The loss of 300 lives in Brazil in the last few years, a massive tailings failure in British Columbia as well. I see Tony Fogarasi with Deerhorn Capital and from British Columbia on here as well in the exploration development sector. I mean, this could not be any more important an issue. I think there was a lot of hopes put to the global tailings review. I think I've heard disappointment over the last week that the issues of safety first, of social issues, about consultation, around transparency, about the immediacy of this moment. It could not be underestimated, where the loss we've seen there is eminent in multiple other communities. So I think it's wonderful that conversation has come to the fore. It's terrible and tragic it's come to the fore with the loss we have. And do I feel like we're safer now than where we were a few years ago? I don't. I think that our achievement moment has not yet arrived. I think our opportunity is still ahead of us. And I think while usually that's wonderful how to have opportunity ahead of you, right now the risk is here for communities who live downstream of large tailing facilities has not dropped tremendously. And so I think we have real work to do to bring that to close. We have work even from confidence. We don't have confidence across stakeholder sectors that the work of the Global Tailings Review yet has yielded to them what they need for its confidence. And even that cross-stakeholder confidence is essential.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for the candidness actually with which you answered that question, Aimee, because this is a question that we keep revisiting through the course of this week, as you can imagine, because it is of course such a front of mind area of risk for operating mines, but also closed mines as well, because there are plenty of legacy tailings dams out there perhaps people have forgotten about as well.
Mm-hmm,
so
absolutely.
So with that, thank you so much, Aimee. There are many more questions coming in for you, but I'm going to call time there. And again, say a massive thank you very, very much to Aimee, and good luck with everything that the future brings with IRMA. So round of applause. Thank you very much,
Thanks so
Aimee.
much for having me, Sarah. Thank